Hello everybody, welcome to my collection video. I'm really mad at myself because I started this and forgot to turn my mic on. So, well, let's try to get through it. One of the things I wanted to say was that in case you're seeing, well, of course you're seeing this, what I mean in case of. For those of you wondering, it's been a while since I uploaded my last review. In fact, I was a little sad when I looked and it said 120 days. Well, I have been productive in making reviews, mainly for my internship. I felt bad for the people who watch my channel. So, my next review is coming up really soon. In fact, it should be up within the next, 3 days of this video's upload. So, and also another thing I wanted to address was, this weird situation. My family keeps decorations and stuff in here, so, that's what all these bags are for. But otherwise, let's get to the collection video that I wish I got to earlier when I didn't realize my mic was on. Now, first up is Professor Layton and the Eternal Diva. I always think it's Enchanted Diva. Professor Layton and the Eternal Diva. Now, I wish I played more Professor Layton. In fact, I wish there was a collection for me to play more of them. I can't say I got into the series because I haven't played it, but my main exposure was Professor Layton versus Ace Attorney, and I loved that game, but I also love just Ace Attorney in general. As for this movie, like the games, Professor Layton has this movie has very nice looking animation. I remember getting into the mystery, but sadly I can't appreciate it as much as I could if I played the games, which I wished I could. Hopefully they can release some more. Well, they are releasing more, but I mean a collection. Next up is Spring and Chaos. Now, this is an interesting movie because it's about Kenji Miyazawa, who you might know authored the books Night on the Galactic Railroad and The Life of Budori Gusko. Movies that I'll probably review soon enough. I've been wanting to review them for a while. I really like them. But they're more famous, arguably, at least in the West, for their animated adaptations, where their characters are portrayed as anthropomorphic cats. They're really good movies. That's what I meant when I said I want to review them. I want to review the movies, not the books. And while I like Kenji Miyazawa, what I know of him, this movie's just, okay. It tries to appeal to those who know the animes. It's interesting because it tries to adapt that anthro-cat kind of style into this biographical work. And making a biographical animated feature is really interesting, especially when it combines the legacy that he's known for in the animated world. So this is an interesting work, and even if I like the person, it's just an okay movie. But the way it portrays his creativity in animation is really beautiful. I quite like that bit, but otherwise, just okay. Now here's a funny one. Alpha and Omega, the 8-movie collection. Why do I own this? Well, one of my friends, Martha, aka Lou Borks or Just a Dog, I don't know if they'll change their name again on YouTube, but essentially, I got this movie for her on her Amazon wishlist back in the day, but she didn't end up getting it, so I contacted Amazon, and when I told them that the movie wasn't delivered, they thought to me. So they ended up delivering this, and, well, here it is in my hands now. I don't really know if I'll watch it. Maybe the first one. I probably won't. If I have 10 hours I want to waste, then, well, I guess I have it here. Does make for a funny story, though. Next up is also kind of funny. Queer Duck. As the tagline says, he can't even fly straight. Queer Duck the movie, based on the Queer Duck web series, which was created by, I think, a Simpsons writer or showrunner. I forget which. It's about a duck who's obviously gay, there are his other gay or bi friends on the cover. I have not seen this movie. I've seen the web series. I think the web series is funny. I think it's really funny that this web series got a movie. It plays on a lot of kind of gay stereotypes at the time. The creator himself is not gay. But from what I understand at the time, that community quite enjoyed this. I guess because, any representation was, fine by them, enjoyable by them. They might have viewed it as kind of like parodying, in fact, but I don't know. My girlfriend said I should get this movie because it'd be funny, and it was only $6, and, well, I think it's funny, so, do you? Next up is Killer Bees. Now, what is Killer Bees? It's a movie about killer bees. I can't remember much about it. I got it for $1, and it's released by Media Blasters under Switchblade Pictures. Now, some of you may be wondering how I got such a good deal on this. Unrated limited edition for only $1? Well, this is the only edition of the movie. I don't know what makes it limited. Is it the fact that it has no menu, no extras? Even the appeal of this is pretty limited, so maybe that's why. The next movie I'm not going to pull out, but there's a funny story behind it with me and Martha that I'm not going to say in this video. Ooh. Next up is Cool Dimension. Another movie I got for $1. How I got these were from Right Stuff Anime. They sold these really movies no one would want for like $1. And this is another one no one really wanted. And I can kind of see why. I don't remember much that went on in it. It has weird, latex, espionage, whatever stuff. Just another cheap Japanese movie. There's a weird armpit licking scene in the middle of it, and that's probably where I'll stop there. Next up is Kirenji Girls Fighting School. Now, this is another $1 movie. I really put them up right against next to each other. This movie's kind of told in 2 parts. I assume it was released that way in Japan. These are really movies that can only thrive in the Japanese video rental scene. It's a movie about this girl who's a troubled youth, and she winds up at this school where people fight instead of study. I don't know. It's some weird, stupid, probably maybe got it from a manga, just some weird, stupid movie. And the $1 movies continue with Tokyo 11 or 10+01. Well, what a kind of weird name. Now, this is a movie I got because I love Death Game. In fact, one of the actors in this is from the Japanese Death Game, Battle Royale. And another thing that the main thing that I remember about this movie is that the characters have watches, like one of my favorite Death Game stories, Zero Escape. So that's my main takeaway from this. There's this weird I think there's a revenge plot with the main character, but it's an okay watch. Better than some of the last few movies I showed, so. Okay, next up is Yakuza Like a Dragon. Like that new video game? No, it's not like the Ichiban story from not the latest game, the one before the latest game. But it's not about that. It's from back in the day, back in like 2006 or 7 maybe. It's about the first Yakuza game, and it's directed by Takashi Miike, famous in the world of Yakuza movies, and I quite like him myself. What could go wrong? Well, yeah, what did go wrong? One thing about this movie is that the story starts about halfway into the game's plot. How can you start a story that you only know that you're missing half of the context for? Just absolutely crazy that they even adapted it that way. And is it because there's not much time in the rest of the movie? Well, yeah, I'd say, but they had enough time because they actually did something kind of interesting here. They adapted the sub-story element of the Yakuza games where you can go around town and interact with some of the characters, and they have little stories going around. And this takes the form of subplots that do not really interact with Kazuma Kiryu, and neither do they actually impact the whole story in general. So they're just meaningless subplots that waste the movie's time that could have been spent telling the actual story of the game. While it is interesting that they did it, they missed the appeal of the sub-story, which has certain appeal in the game medium because, well, more game to play, and you interact with the characters through your main character. But since the main character doesn't interact with those sub-stories in this movie, neither do they impact the plot. Just a waste of time. Sadly, I really don't like this one. Although Miike's adaptation of the Ace Attorney movie is really great, somehow he condensed that game into just a 2-hour movie really well. The Ace Attorney movie by him is pretty good. Next up we have Calamari Wrestling. Now this one is by Minoru Kawasaki. I think he's kind of known as the king of B movies in Japan. And this is a really humorous movie about a wrestler who is said to have died, I think, and then he ends up a squid and he gets back in the ring. And it's, a fun little tokusatsu kind of movie. Although its story is a bit weird, it feels like the plot ends and then they needed more stories, so they kind of just started a new conflict. It's not an elegant plot, but it's a pretty funny movie. I quite like Kawasaki's works. In fact, he follows me on Twitter, surprisingly. Speaking of Kawasaki, Executive Koala. Now, this is one of my favorite movies. It has humor, but at the same time, I can't tell if some of the stuff in this movie, I laugh, but it's kind of surreal enough that it comes off as a little bit eerie. So it's something that really teeters the line between comedy and horror that I don't exactly... It's a really unique blend. I really, really enjoy this movie. Probably more than others can, and maybe even more than I should. But it's just a really... it has a musical number. That says how weird it gets. I really quite like this movie. My favorite of his works. Oh, I should have described the plot. It's about a koala whose wife ends up murdered and he becomes the prime suspect. But he also has a bit of amnesia. While I say he's a koala, most people in that world are still human, so it's kind of a guy in a koala suit walking around urban Japan. Pretty weird, but I like it. Next up is another Kawasaki work. This, as you can tell, I kind of subcategorize this stuff into directors. This is The Rug Cop. Now, what it means by rug is the main cop has a wig on his head, or toupee, that he flings around and it's also alive. There's also some weird terrorist plot in the movie. As you can tell, these movies aren't for plot, they're just for funnies. And this one is pretty entertaining. One of the things I like about Minoru Kawasaki is you can tell exactly where he gets his inspiration from. He takes inspiration from the media he grew up with in youth, like tokusatsu movies or wrestling. And this one is from a little subgenre in Japan, the detective kind of show, where this detective has a weird quirk, like one of the bigger examples is Yo-Yo Cop. So well, even if I don't necessarily find this movie great, I find it funny. It's a funny watch, and you can tell that he puts a lot of love in the movies he makes. They're about stuff he cares about, and, well, I love media, and so does he, so quite appeals to me. Next up, now this is going to feel a bit weird since I didn't establish these movies beforehand. It's the third one in the series. Elle Changed the World. Yeah, what a weird kind of cover. I've never seen a movie title be over the shoulder, like on the left side of a cover. That's really weird. Now, this is part of the live-action Death Note series. I'm not going to say whether or not it takes place before or after, so to not spoil it, I'm going to leave that ambiguous for both the anime and the live-action movies. Now, this is a story about the main detective Elle of Death Note trying to hunt down this bioterrorism group. And this is because the live-action movies proved to be pretty popular. The anime proved to be pretty popular. So it capitalizes on that, and I like it because it shows another adventure of Elle. But there's also some of it that feels a bit awkward, like, you know, now that we saw, you know, in the main media, we see him go up against the powers of a death god, but now he goes up against just humanity in this one. It's a little bit hard to top the epic proportions of Death Note. But at the same time, you know, it's still a detective movie that, you know, I enjoyed, and also I just love Elle. He's one of my favorite characters of all time. So no matter what, seeing a bit more of him portrayed well, hey, you know, that I got that to enjoy. Okay, next up is Reincarnation, a movie by Takashi Shimizu. I covered a lot of Shimizu's works before. He's most famous for Ju-On, a series I love. This is a movie that can be pretty creepy. Although I still prefer Ju-On, this is actually, some people ask me to review this, so I might do so one day. It's an interesting movie where people kind of are filming something. They're filming something, and then they get memories of people who died in that same location. So it's kind of like an interesting mystery. And, you know, because it's horror, they end up dropping like flies. One thing interesting about this movie is that the professor is played by Kiyoshi Kurosawa, Shimizu's real-life film professor. So that's a little interesting bit of this. Maybe I'll look at it one day. I'm not really that familiar with this line of movies. Maybe I'll get more. It kind of encouraged you to collect them all with the 8, huh? But yeah, I enjoyed this movie. What can I say about these next ones? Ju-On, you know, the Ju-On pseudo trilogy. I really love these movies. I love Ju-On, it's great horror. Ju-On 2, it's even better horror. Ju-On White Ghost, the basketball wielding grandma says it all. Black Ghost is actually pretty good. These movies came out on Blu-ray in the UK. I really wish they came out over here. And they're released by Arrow, so they ought to be. Especially since Arrow released Ringu Collection. I'd love to put those two series back to back. Now, this is one that I've gotten a few questions about because it's also in that canon of, I mean, I shouldn't say canon, I sound pretentious, but J-horror movies that were adapted for the West. Apartment 1303. This is the J-horror series. This is the J-horror era of popularity in Japan on its last legs. It's a forgettable movie that can't scare, and I reviewed it as part in a written review in my internship. A really non-scary, even laughable at times movie that I think people only remember because it got an American adaptation. So you can say it's part of that era where everything was getting adapted over here. Zarkor. I haven't seen this movie. It's cheap Western kaiju fun. Or at least I assume it's fun. I bought it because I want it to be fun. I don't know. I'll watch it when I can. Pocket Ninjas. One of the famously known as one of the worst movies ever. And I can't disagree with it. I can't disagree with that because just so many aspects of this movie are confusing. It's such a cheap movie. It doesn't make sense. You know how in a kind of movie like Karate Kid or Rocky, there's a montage? There's a montage almost every 20 minutes in this. There's like so many montages in this. But I can't help but find it at least a bit funny. It's so bad, it's good. Speaking of, The Amazing Bulk, another so bad it's good movie. Well, kind of. One of the big things about so bad it's good is that there's a comedy in the directors or the people behind it not knowing what they're producing is bad. There's an earnest effort that falls flat. That's part of the comedy. Sadly, this one, they know that it's a bad movie. They're trying to make it a bit funny. And when it tries to be funny, it's actually the least funny it's the least funniest it is when it tries to be funny. But the crazy amount of stock animations that they have, it's a movie where everything's in front of a green screen. Just the cheapest CGI, the cheapest stock animations. It's all the set for this movie. What can I say? Next up is, oops, let me pull it out. I think it has some adhesive still on it. Yeah, Exam. I spoke of my love of Death Game before, and this is one of them. This one actually got kind of a little bit more big than some of the other Death Games out there. These people come in to take an exam for this really super high paying job at this pharmaceutical company. But it's kind of a psychological game because they're asked to, of course, answer the test, but when they flip the paper over, there's nothing. There's no question. So it's kind of like they're trying to psych each other out, ask them, trying to make each other screw up the test, trying to figure out what the test even is. It's an interesting movie, and although there are some good moments, let me try to think. The ending's a little predictable. There are some interesting... One of my favorite things about Death Games is the length the characters will go. It's really... One of the main appeals of the genre is it shows what humanity or people are pushed to under certain constraints, which the writer is able to control within this really, stronghold scenario they create the rules for. And I like that. At the same time, though, I think that I remember there were some bits of this where I just wasn't too into it. But I shouldn't say that in like a mean way. It's like there's some good aspects. It looks very visually appealing, but I think that it's just okay. Next up, I have these Death Games back to back. Fermat's Room. Mathematicians are called into a room to solve this math equation that may or may not be paradoxical, I forget. and the room is about to crush them. So another death game, but an interesting concept. It's a Spanish movie. I have not watched it yet. I really should watch this because I've been interested in this, but I haven't seen it yet. Okay, so next up, whoops, pulled out Fermat's Room again. Let's look at that. Next up, 9 Dead. This is another kind of movie like Saw. These people are put into a room and they're all connected. None of them can really think of how, and it's their job to connect, to figure out how they're connected. Now, this is a really cheap movie. There's not a lot of production values here. This is kind of anti-Exam, where it doesn't look that good. It's not a visually appealing movie. It's not, there's not a lot of bells and whistles. In fact, the script is pretty bad. I think that I really wish it went through another draft. But the core meat of it, the actual plot, I'm fond of. I think that the core story of this is pretty good. I like it. You just have to kind of sift through the mud to get through a pretty fun, nice movie. I like it. These next ones, I don't know if I can say a whole lot. I mean, the Ring 2 movie collection, watch my review. The Grudge 1, 2, and 3, probably shouldn't even pull these out. What can I say? Watch my reviews of them. In some ways, I wish I could kind of go back and use what I know now to review those movies better. But I'm always getting better. It's just that I really loved the J-horror era. I was really into it. So I'm kind of a perfectionist on how I could have done those videos. But that's something that an artist always feel looking back at their work. Probably arrogant to say artist, but, I draw too. I hang out with art friends, so... take that as you will. Looking back at my work, I always wish I could do better. This is Apartment 1303, the American version. I wanted to watch this after I saw the Japanese version. I couldn't stand the Japanese version, so I've yet to watch this. Oh, speaking of can't stand... Pulse 2. You know how Amazing Bulk was filmed mainly in front of a green screen? That's this movie. And it's weird because they have some real locations, some real houses that they didn't have to green screen their actors in front of. Just an absolute awful movie. The first movie was bad enough. And then they go with this direct-to-DVD crap that's just like... has lame excuses for shocking gore. Absolute rubbish. Absolute garbage. One of the worst movies I've seen. Almost as bad has Pulse 3, which is somehow even worse. And they made another of these, and almost one thing about this movie... I'm gonna have to review these movies one day. Almost every scene ends up contradicting the last scene. Absolutely awful consistency, awful story. I have to wonder, one thing interesting, these are actually on Blu-ray in Australia. I couldn't believe that when I read it, but they have the whole Pulse trilogy on Blu-ray. I'm actually tempted to get it because, as you can't tell, I'm a collector. But, maybe I'll get it one day. Maybe when I end up reviewing those movies, because I don't like leaving unfinished business. I started reviewing Pulse, and, well, I'll have my work cut out for me on the sequels. Speaking of sequel, wow, I'm so smooth with segues. The Blair Witch 2, Book of Shadows. there's something about this movie. Maybe it's my empathy for what happened to the director. My video on this is one of my favorite videos I ever made, because I really delved into this interesting backstory of the movie. I really wanted to like this movie because I think there are some interesting things about it, and I'm in love with the 2000s. I love late 90s, early 2000s movies, so I wanted to like this. It has a little bit of, it tries to have a bit of Scream's postmodernism, but yeah, it's just not that great of a horror movie. It, a lot of the scares, it's redundant. A lot of the scares don't really work. I wish Berlinger's cut could come out, even if I don't think it would be, would fix it. This movie deserves to be the best it can be, as I said in my review. Now, next up, I'm going to be jumping around this. I'm going to jump through this because... Now, why? That's a whole bunch of movies I'm skipping. They're all Godzilla movies. I own every Godzilla movie, well, except for Godzilla vs. Kong, or whatever that American one was. I really like that movie. That movie really pleased me as a Godzilla fan. Godzilla is one of my favorite characters ever. He's kind of like Frankenstein, a product of human science. But unlike Frankenstein, while Godzilla started off as a monster like Frankenstein, he ended up also being a hero in several of his movies. It's kind of like no matter where you start, you can still be a good guy, even if people don't appreciate you because, as of course Tokyo always hates when Godzilla shows up. But, he ends up saving them, every now and then. I really like Godzilla's character. He's very versatile. He could be a really awful villain. He could be, a destructive villain or the hero that saves the day. Destroyer or protector. I quite love Godzilla. Maybe I should pull out some of my favorites, like Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah. Time travel shenanigans. This one is really funny. Really, really entertaining. One of my favorite of the Heisei eras. Godzilla vs. Destoroyah is a really touching one, especially since it plays on the Baby Godzilla arc the Heisei era has. Some people probably won't know what I'm talking about. Final Wars is a classic, absolutely crazy movie by Ryuhei Kitamura. Quite like his work. And Shin Godzilla. What can I say? A really big movie, and I really like it. It made Godzilla really horrifying again, which, in a world that has developed so long since his initial movie when he was supposed to be a force of terror, this movie did a lot to get us that really intimidating, scary Godzilla. But I also have some other kaiju movies here. Mothra, a really great movie that, hey, it's a classic. Quite like it. Once again, like Godzilla, this one is about, well, I'd say it has a message, but it does have a message. It just kind of takes a bit of that King Kong plot, don't mess with nature or, nature will wreak vengeance. These are two not kaiju movies, but Toho Tokusatsu movies. I don't know much of anything about them. But Mill Creek has become quite a name in Tokusatsu releases on Blu-ray, and I'm really thankful they released this. I love it. King Kong Escapes. It has a little mecha King Kong, and I watched it a few years back on Svengoolie. I love these movies, so, Ooh, I almost missed The Rebirth of Mothra, a trilogy that, how not the kind of Dragon Ball writing that people became tired of, where you need Goku needs to fight the villain, but he can't. He needs to master a new form, and the new form is pretty much a win the battle button. These movies take after that kind of writing. At the end of all of these, Mothra ends up finding a new transformation to beat the monster. That by the end of the third one, I think power scaling fans figured out that the final Mothra in this is the strongest kaiju ever. So that's pretty funny. I like the second one. The second one's my favorite because it has some kind of Indiana Jones temple shenanigans with the human characters. And it's about pollution in the ocean. So it takes Mothra's, earthy green kind of message and takes it to, a different location. I like it. Here's another one. Gappa. Is it a play on Kappa? Yeah, I guess so. I feel bad whenever I say I haven't seen these movies because it makes me feel like I wasted money. But I do want to watch these movies. If you can't tell, I went through a kaiju phase and kind of burnt myself out. So, that's this. I've seen a little bit of this. There's an episode of Red Dwarf I watched with my girlfriend that uses footage from this. Oh, speaking of kaiju, you won't see it here. I've shown it in a bit of my other videos. But the Gamera Complete Collection. I really want to get into that. But, as I said, burnout. And I've seen the first movie, though. It's not exactly all I think a lot of the Gamera movies center around kids and the giant turtle. So I think it's meant to appeal to younger kids, but I don't think that... I found the kid in the first movie annoying, and I haven't seen the others, so, oh well. Next up, Raiga, and God Raiga versus King Ora. Yeah, more kaiju movies. I kind of wish I had waited to get the trilogy SRS Cinema released of these. From what I understand, these are, I think, around 2000s era movies that I think these movies try to be serious. This movie is made after, and from what I understand, it's kind of funny, maybe intentionally so, to the point where they use little action figures to portray the humans at one point, so I've heard. I ought to watch these, though, because, hey, I do love kaiju cinema, just in moderation. Also, monster movie, Jellyfish Eyes. Now, oh, let me get it to focus on my face. Jellyfish Eyes. Now, this is a movie made by Takashi Murakami, who is I really like his art. He draws a lot of character art that his characters are like, a lot of his characters are like cartoony. And I think it's interesting how cartoons, something that have been a simplification of reality. Well, I guess a lot of art has been a simplification in style. And it's interesting to see more like his cartoon influence in his art. This is his movie, and it's kind of like a Pokemon kind of movie. These kids get these monsters, and they have to kind of battle them out for, I forget why. Big monster shows up, big battle. One thing that's kind of sad, though, this movie ends on a trailer for a sequel. Really bold. But by the end of it, I do want more. But sadly, a couple of years back, Murakami had to announce that he, bankruptcy on the project. So it's been like the sequel was in development for like a decade, and he had to cancel it. I'd love it to resurface again because this is a really appealing movie. I quite enjoyed this one. Even if it's an outlier of the Criterion label, I'm not a Criterion fan, so I like this. More kaiju. Kaiju things. Kaiju mono. Now, this is a movie about how a guy gets injected and becomes a giant wrestler. Played by a famous Japanese wrestler. And, of course, he has to fight a giant monster. This is a movie directed by Minoru Kawasaki, so it's a really fun movie. Once again, as you can tell, his love of kaiju and wrestling clash in this work. Oh, another Minoru Kawasaki kaiju movie. Monster Seafood Wars. I think these gang of like monster fighters get in a big mech and want to fight monsters who are based on seafood to make sushi. Very Japanese concept. I really ought to watch this. This was my first order from SRS Cinema. They release a lot of obscure stuff. I'm, quite fond of a lot of their stuff. Actually, I have a lineup of SRS stuff here. Releasing like Nezuda 1964. Nezuda is a lost media kind of deal. Hey, interesting, huh? I like lost media. It's about this movie that was canceled because the rats ended up spreading. They were a health hazard. It was about a movie with rats running through a city. When it was canceled, Daiei ended up making Gamera. So it's kind of the origin story of Gamera through this canceled movie. And it's interesting because they remake some of the rare images of the promotional material and making of. They remake that in this what's it called? It's like docudrama kind of movie. It's interesting. Attack of the Giant Teacher. I think some teacher teaches music and then a giant monster shows up and he has to fight him. I guess mostly nude. Yeah, I mean, you're a kaiju, doesn't mean your clothes are. I want to watch this movie. It's another SRS Cinema piece, but I haven't seen it yet. Speaking of SRS Cinema, The Idol. This is a 4-hour movie. It stars, one of the characters is Kayako from Ju-on. I forget her name. It's only a 40-minute movie. It's interesting though because it's made by a Westerner who lives in Japan, and it's kind of like a love letter to Japanese culture, otaku culture, and it's interesting, I'll say. I was mid on it. It takes a while to get to the plot, but it's a fun movie. Well, why I keep going there? It's a okay-ish, can be fun movie. About this idol that can change people's lives. It's weird. Now, one of the bigger movies SRS picked up, The Day of Destruction. Toshiaki Toyoda is a director that is somewhat well known, and I'd say he's somewhat well known in the West, at least if you keep up with Japanese movies. This was my first of his. I like that there's a rhythm to this movie, but it's kind of drawn out and dull. He has a lot of emphasis on music, and that is really appealing. The editing in this and how the scenes fit the music is really good. They have a rhythm to it, but it kind of drags and can be a bit dull. It doesn't help that it comments on the issue of taxation when the Olympics were canceled in Japan during the COVID pandemic. It's kind of like an allegory in a sense. But since I'm not Japanese, that flew over my head. It says some good stuff, but it's not that great of a watch to me. I'll probably try to speed it up going forward. Next up is Archangels. It has a weird CGI dog in it that runs around. It's at this Christian, is it a Christian girl? Whatever, this prestigious girls' school. It's very like kind of fantasy-esque, but there's not like magic. People are getting kidnapped from there, and these group of girls have to stop them. It's a manga kind of thing. It's fun. It is definitely fun. Machine Girl. I have not seen this movie. It's much in the vein of Tokyo Gore Police. Now, these movies are really violent, and they take the piss out of themselves. They're fun, but I have to be in the right mood for them. One thing that's kind of big on these, that they're released by Media Blasters, and who I really want to like, but I have to admit, they're kind of infamous. Like, I forget if it's one of these movies, but their first release of it, the color quality of the film was like really bad. And they were kind of infamous for having to re-release their own movies. So that didn't really bode well. And in fact, there's a lot of this that I'm bothered by. Like, there's an extra mini movie that came with the DVD of this. They could, like a little kind of sequel-esque movie, they could easily put it on the disc of this Blu-ray. It's Lethal Force Edition. You'd think that'd be special. It should have everything, but it's not on this Blu-ray. So, well, that's a bit of a bother. And same thing here, where there's this little extra movie on the DVD about this girl with a machine gun coming out of her butt. I'm just going to embarrass myself looking at this collection. But that short film is not on this Blu-ray. It's on one of the DVDs they released, but they didn't put it on here. Why? I really want to support them because they do indie work, but I have to admit, they could do a bit better. But I do want to support them because they have released some good stuff. Especially when they came back, because for a while they were dormant. One of their stuff, Psycho Gothic Lolita. The name alone might embarrass me, but this is a fun, stupid action movie with a girl with a goth aesthetic, revenge movie, fighting several people. Ooh, this guy has psychic powers, this girl's moe, stuff like that. Really fun stuff. I think even directed by the guy who did Tokyo Gore Police, maybe. I was waiting for that to come on Blu-ray too. It was on DVD so long, so I'm glad Media Blasters put it out. Now there is another movie in that same vein, Mutant Girl Squad. A chainsaw comes out of a butt. I don't know. I haven't seen this movie. These girls are mutants. They have powers. I haven't seen it. I got it because it was for a pretty good deal. Under the line Sushi Typhoon, which is, kind of that gore comedy kind of over-the-top movie. This is also part of Sushi Typhoon. Hell Driver. Now this can be quite entertaining. Oh, unlike what Media Blasters did, because these aren't Media Blasters. Who released these? Oh gosh, I know them. Well Go USA. Well Go indeed, because these have the short films on these Blu-rays that kind of act as bonus materials, but are also like continuity. They're also part of the movie that I wish was in Tokyo Gore Police or that other one. This one, Hell Driver, is a crazy movie. Zombies, take over the world, and this girl fights them with this katana chainsaw. And one of my favorite scenes in it has a zombie who's like full of blades, sword fighting an actual truck. This movie, man. The short films on it are also like pretty fun though. Now next up is another weird movie. Oh gosh, this is the segment where I embarrass myself. R100, which stands for Rating 100. In other words, this is the Japanese rating system. You can't watch this movie unless you're 100 years old. This guy finds an underground carousel and signs a contract for dominatrixes to humiliate him in his daily life. But when they end up pushing boundaries and he ends up killing them, they're out for blood for him. And there's a subplot where the people who are making the movie are utterly confused about it. This is a really funny watch. Really entertaining. I mentioned Ryuhei Kitamura before. He did Godzilla Final Wars. Versus. Now, this is a movie I really wanted to see, but it was released by Well Go USA, or actually Media Blasters back in the day, and it became a super rare movie. You know, sold for like $100. But Arrow Video picked it up, and thankfully, well, we have this. Both the director's cut, which he came 2 years later to add some extra scenes, and the original theatrical version. Balls to the wall action. That's Ryuhei Kitamura. A really crazy movie that just has some fun, stupid action. Being more kind to Media Blasters, they also released this Ryuhei Kitamura movie, Alive. Some guy is in jail, and then I think he's frozen in time, wakes up in the future, fights aliens. I haven't seen it, but I wanna. Okay, next up is Yokai Monsters. Now, this is a movie, this is a quadrology, trilogy plus a fourth one. Daiei Studios, I think it was Daiei, back in the day, made these tokusatsu movies where yokai come about and they scare people. That's it at its most simplest form. They mostly take place in the samurai era. And, well, like that's an official era. You know what I mean, where samurai's about. And I think that the first two are fun. I don't really like the third one. It's more engulfed with the samurai plot, but the first one can actually be a little bit scary. The second one more so appeals to kids, where these kaiju, not kaiju, the yokai are given human characteristics and they have to stop a bad guy. And that inspired The Great Yokai War. Let me pull it out. The Great Yokai War. This is a movie by Takashi Miike, inspired by those early 60 movies. And it's a really interesting movie. It has, of course, some Takashi Miike weirdness, but it's kind of like a never-ending story kind of movie, where this kid ends up finding a bunch of yokai, and of course there's an evil yokai that they have to take down. So it's kind of it's a movie that I think kids can get into, but it gets really dark by the end. Like, surprisingly so. Hey, I mean, I don't know if it's for kids. It's definitely for Miike. And not to spoil, it ends on a cliffhanger. And then almost 2 decades later, a sequel comes out. I have to see that sequel. SRS released it just recently. I don't know why Arrow didn't pick up the rights to it. They could have put it out with this or after this, an upsell. Hey, you want the sequel? Because you will want the sequel. It's a cliffhanger. But oh well. Either way, we finally got it over in America, thanks to SRS Cinema. Next up, Audition. watch my review of it. That's all I can say. Ichi the Killer, a famous Miike work that pushed the lines of violence. I think that it has a lot of great moments in it. The characters, like the two main characters, are definitely really interesting, really engaging. A really unique movie that is definitely violent, but it's still, what can I say? It's interesting. I mean, if I want to be arrogant, stay tuned for my review of this, because I'm almost definitely going to look into it again. Speaking of, but I probably won't look into it before I do this, the Dead or Alive trilogy. Once again, Miike is known for being really violent, really raunchy, and that's the first movie. The first movie, well, that's all of these movies really. The first movie has a lot of crazy moments, and it has this really interesting it has a good message to it, and a absolutely balls to the wall ending. But to get to those little crazy segments, I'm not too into it. The sequel I'm really into. Great characters, really unpredictable movie, and it has a nice pace to it. I love the sequel. The third one, I could have forgave it if it at least had good action, but it makes you wait so long for the good action between an ugly movie, a possibly homophobic scenario, and I just don't like Dead or Alive Final. But hey, I love the sequel. Dead or Alive 2, Birds, is a great movie. Zebraman 1 and 2. They're my last review I did. Watch it if you want to know my thoughts. The Happiness of the Katakuris. This is one of my favorite, if not my favorite, Miike work, I think. It has really cool claymation, and it's a really funny movie, really weird movie. It's a musical, but it doesn't beat you over the head with songs. It's paced just right, and the songs are pretty good. And I can't think of another musical like it. Essentially, this family starts an inn, and their family is like, their connection is tenuous. They're kind of almost being split apart, but they're united by this inn because a person ends up dying in it and they have to cover up the murders. Well, not murders, sorry. Deaths. They have to cover up the deaths, and I swear that's not spoilers. They have to cover up the deaths, and through it they end up uniting more as a family. A really unique work. Western Sukiyaki Django. I'm not that familiar with the Django series. This kind of combines Western and samurai elements. Quentin Tarantino introduces it. He's in the movie. He quite likes Miike. It was interesting to see him. I bet he got a kick out of it. Might have even been before his Django. But this is, it's a kind of fun movie. It's alright. It can be fun. Oh, actually, before I put it back, one thing weird about it is I think they released a director's cut version of it, like, recently. I got an older version of it because it was cheaper, and it has a digital download disc. I've never seen that before in my collection, so it's a bit of an old one. That's interesting. Over Your Dead Body. Another Miike movie. It's very pretty looking. Some interesting concepts, but I don't like it that much. It's all right. It's all right. Battle Royale, the Battle Royale collection of the two movies. I don't like the second one. I think the second one's bad, but the first one is a great death game movie, and it has Beat Takeshi in it, who steals the show whenever he's on screen. Really also has what's his name? Oh gosh, well, what's his name? Tatsuya Fujiwara, who, is pretty big in Japan, and rightly so. A really good, the first movie is a really good movie. Tense, and the characters you follow, all they have really interesting little adventures on their own way. I say adventures, but it's almost more like bloodbath. Black Rat, an obscure movie that's kind of like a death game and a slasher. These students are united at this school after the death of a friend, and this black rat ends up, hunting them down and sometimes puts them in a bit of a game. It's a fun movie. I enjoyed it. Not super great, but it hits certain spots that I like. Another Media Blasters movie, Akihabara Deep, an adaptation of the anime and manga. I haven't seen it, but, I ought to watch it. Or is this? No. Wait, no. Is this? Yeah, it's Media Blasters. Next up, this release is pretty special. If I can get it out. Uzumaki, based on the manga of the same name. I think that, and this is special because it was Discotek. Discotek is famous in the anime media space. This is their first live action movie under one of their projects, Tokyo Nihon Nights. It's Nihon Nights. And this is a movie that had long been on DVD, but had never had a high quality version of it, or HD version of it, until now. It doesn't tell the whole story. I think it was before Volume 3 came out. It has some really good visuals, great music that sets up the atmosphere, and in fact, a lot of its visuals are also great at setting an eerie tone. I need to read the manga, but this is a pretty good adaptation for what it is. Even if it rushes through it, it still gives you a creepy feeling. I kind of wish they added a sequel that could conclude it, even. Okay, next up is Death Note. The two live-action movies, Death Note and Death Note: The Last Name. Now, I was really into Death Note. When was it? 2022? I really liked Death Note. So I went into these movies not, being, okay, this is a live action take, but they're actually pretty good. In fact, they diverge a bit from the anime to be its own thing, at certain points. And not only that, but these are movies that, because it's a big anime, it has to be a two-part movie. And it's done really well. It tells the events of the anime, but paced just right for this movie format. It doesn't feel like we're fast forwarding through it. It's paced pretty well. Also, it has California, Rest in Peace, which is pretty funny. I found that pretty funny. Sadly, opposed to the Viz Media Blu-ray, Funimation bought this, and we don't get the English dub from the Viz actors. That's a bit of a shame. But these are really good movies, especially for adaptations of the anime. And it's Tatsuya Fujiwara is also in this movie, and it's really clever because just like you wouldn't suspect Light, the A student of Death Note, to be the killer, Tatsuya Fujiwara was known as a friendly face, but here he's he plays like Yagami. And the character who plays L, the detective, is an up-and-comer. The actor who plays L is an up-and-comer. And L has so many mannerisms he has to get down, but he plays that role so well. It's really surprising for an actor relatively new on the scene. And then there's an original sequel that it does not adapt anything, Death Note, Relight the World. Or wait, that might be the OVAs. Death Note, Light Up the New World. This is a movie from like around 2018, I think. Essentially, several Death Notes are descent upon Earth, and so the Japanese police are trying to hunt down who has them and stop people from using them. This is a movie with it has some good, good twists in it, I think. It has some good moments in it. I think that sometimes, it, falls apart a little by the end, but it's still a movie that I got quite into so far. Like, not so far, I finished it, but for a lot of it, I was pretty into it. And it carries off of the Death Note live action movies. Like, it's not like, oh, this could be a sequel to the anime. This like appeals to those who watch the movie. And I like that. Okay, next up, 2LDK. This is a movie that is kind of connected to Ryuhei Kitamura. It is part of the Duel series, the Duel duology. Essentially, I think a producer dared Kitamura and the director behind this. I bet you can't do a movie in one room with two people. And well, this was this director's response. Two actresses want the same role. They're waiting for the call to hear who's in it, and they're roommates, but they hate each other's guts, and their rivalry soon turns really violent. I love movies that take place in one room, as you might know from Saw. So this movie quite appeals to me. The Invisible Man Appears also features The Invisible Man versus the Human Fly. These are old Japanese tokusatsu movies, of course taking off after the Invisible Man series by Universal. They're interesting. They look pretty rough because they aren't derived from the negatives. They look rough because they're derived from an old film reel. So, really nice media preservation here. And, they're interesting watches, I'll say. They're alright. Now, here's House. A really psychedelic 60s or 70s Japanese movie. It's a kind of, these girls take a vacation to a house that's haunted. And it's not necessarily scary haunted. It's a, whoa, I'm tripping out haunted. It's hard to describe this movie. It's crazy. I want to see Nobuhiko Obayashi's other works, though. He's the director of this. Or maybe they're she. I don't know. Speaking of directors, here is Tsukamoto. Because I'm going to be trying to go fast through this, I don't know if I'll talk about all of these. But Tsukamoto is best known for Tetsuo the Iron Man, is a really unique director, and it shows in several of these films. A lot of his films start off in your face, in your face music-wise, in your face editing-wise, directing-wise, and then he kind of mellows out. I like a lot of his older work when they were kind of in your face, but some of his later work is good too, like Kotoko. Kotoko is one of my my preference of his later era work, I think. As for my favorites, Tetsuo 2 has a great story. Tetsuo 1 is most famous for all its oddities. It is really weird. Tetsuo 2 has a good story, though. As does Tokyo Fist. Tokyo Fist and Tetsuo 2 are back to back. I think Tokyo Fist also has a lot of good stuff. I think he's really good at writing woman characters. His work is really interesting. I don't know if I'll talk about it so much here, though. Hiruko. This is one of Tsukamoto's early works. It's based on a manga. Has some weird moments. not enough to get me into it. It's not, I couldn't get into it that much. It's interesting though. I'm going to regret saying that so many times. But a work of his I did get into, Gemini. This work is really interesting because it takes it takes a lot of tropes that are classic, that you've seen before, but it weaves them in a different way. It's about this doctor who ends up being pushed into a well by his long-lost twin brother, who's significantly poorer and, kind of envies his life he was given, I think. A really beautiful looking movie. A movie that I really like the kind of, I like how the story elements play out here. I think his Tokyo Fist and Tetsuo 2 have my favorite characters by Tsukamoto, but this is probably my favorite story. The Bloodthirsty Trilogy, classic Japanese horror. The first one is really I need to stop saying interesting. The first one meshes a lot of Western and even Hammer horror influences with Japanese horror. It's a good watch and a short watch. I like it. The sequels, are okay. I enjoyed the third one though. It's okay. Ringu. My reviews may be old on it, but this is a pretty big one for me. Hey, so a lot of you probably came from my reviews of Ringu, actually, because that took off after Sadako got in Dead by Daylight. And as I said, here's Sadako 3D. Essentially, someone revives a kind of new curse and spreads it over the internet. A good premise to adapt the original scenario of Ring, but it just doesn't have the scare factor. And it's Sadako 3D, so a lot of its scares are ooh. So, yeah. I wish they brought the sequel over here. I don't like it being unfinished on my shelf. I wish they brought the sequel and the new Sadako movie that came out a while back over here. Dark Water. Watch my review of it. Pulse. Watch my review of it. I will say, maybe I shouldn't say that for every one of these, but I will say one thing, it's interesting. Oh, I need to stop saying interesting. One thing that's clever that not a lot of people know about this cover, well, people probably know it, but if you can't read Japanese, this is mirrored, so it's almost like you could only read it if you're from her perspective on the cover. So that's fun. One Missed Call. Watch my review of them. Quite like them. Cure. From Kiyoshi Kurosawa, who did Pulse. This is a really interesting mystery movie where we get these guys' murders end up happening, but they can't tell how. The police can't tell how. But the audience ends up seeing how, but it's still confusing how they happen. Like, somehow this guy ends up coming in contact with people, and the people he comes in contact with end up involved in these murders. So it's really interesting where we see the detective side, but we also see the other side, what's actually causing the murders, and it's still a good mystery. I can't think of any other mystery that can do that. Also a really good movie that, speaks on human psychology. It's a really interesting work, and it has that kind of silent, eerie air that lingers, that you may recognize from Pulse. Hey, these feel like forever ago to me, but hey, I reviewed them. Tokyo Living Dead Idol. The name kind of says it all. It's a Japanese movie where this idol is bitten and some people, I think, want to hunt her down because she's going to become a zombie. Zombies are also taking over Tokyo. Just a kind of, schlocky movie. Like Ouija Japan. You may think it's like the Ouija movies, but it's somehow they use a Ouija and an app comes up on their phone from Kokuri-san, who's the spirit who oversees Ouija boards in Japan. They don't talk to ghosts, they talk to Kokuri-san, who talks to spirits. Different. He puts an app on their phone that puts the characters in a battle royale kind of game. What kind of movie is this? I haven't seen it, but the weird premise alone made me want to get it. Miss Zombie, a Sabu movie. I want to see more Sabu movies like Danganronner. Sadly, Danganronner is only in Europe, and region locked. Zombies are in the world, and the rich want to take them and make them their maids, because they can train them. It says some nice stuff about society. Well, maybe not nice. I'm just trying to avoid using the word interesting. It says stuff about society, like the poor oppress zombies. So it's about how the poor can oppress how the oppressed can oppress the oppressed, so to speak, to maintain social status. A movie that has a good point, but it's not that interesting to watch. Or at least I didn't find it so much entertaining, so to say. Corpse Party. I love the Corpse Party games, and they could get away with quite a bit less because they have pixely graphics, and in that ambiguity, you can get quite a scary game. It's a minimal game, but for here, minimal budget doesn't always make for a great atmosphere, especially when you have the clarity of real life to see, just how cheap it looks, not the stylization of pixels. That does seem a bit mean though, but that I kind of disregard that later on, because later on in the movie, I think around the third act, it steps away from the plot of the game. So I'm like, wow, I'm interested in this. It's not like I have a game that does this better. It's like this becomes its own story. I want to see it through. So it ends on a kind of, there's a sequel to this that sadly never came out in America. I wish it did. This is by Media Blasters. Now that they're back, hopefully they can put out the sequel. Because I really do, as mean as I was at first, I think that does, drag the movie down. But I do want to see where it goes from there, since it got an original story, by the end. Cube. I reviewed this in my internship. Not as good as the original American one. Being Natural. I got this movie because it looked weird. Air Doll. I also reviewed this in my internship. I got this movie because it looked weird. It ended up being really depressing. But it's a good movie though. Wow, I don't think I mean to, but a lot of these movies I reviewed at my internship. Brave Father Online. A fun kind of drama movie centering around a video game. What can I say? It's alright. One Cut of the Dead. So, this is a really interesting movie. of course, about zombies. And it's about shot in one cut, like one camera take. And this is a really interesting movie that really surprised me. I was not expecting what was going to happen in this one. But it's pretty funny. You know, it's about zombies, but it's more of a comedy. And it comes with one cut of the dead in Hollywood, about one of the characters in Hollywood where the zombie strike, you know, the zombies come about again. That's a short movie. I was actually surprised, I was surprised that this came out. This was released by Third Window Films with just the main movie. And then the creators made one cut of the dead in Hollywood. And so they re-released this movie, including that extra little 40-minute film. Really, you know, I'm really glad, because that 40-minute film could have been easily stuck in Japan. But thankfully, I can enjoy it. A Record of Sweet Murder. Now, this is a movie by Koji Shiraishi. He's famous for found footage or fake documentary in Japan. This movie has a lot of interesting ethics in it. Actually, we got through a movie that was shot in one cut. This movie is also tries to do one cut, at least in terms of presentation. It cuts on motion, you know, so there are cuts, but it's like a near seamless movie where time is non-diegetic. Or is it diegetic? Where time is diegetic, I mean. Where, you know, it's told in one go. And it's an interesting movie that explores... I think after it, you might talk to your friends and go, oh, well, what do you think of that? Was that ethical? I really like Koji Shiraishi's stuff. I wish a lot more of it came over here. He might be my favorite director, if only because he directed my favorite horror movie, Noroi. Wreck. Watch my review of them. I of course love the Wreck series. In fact, maybe after this video I'll produce a long compilation where I review every movie to, you know, because those long videos seem pretty popular now, so I might do that. Psycho, The Collection. Maybe I should have waited until they released this on 4K. I haven't seen it yet. I want to. How can I call myself a horror fan, huh? I'm not going to pull this out, because I'm not going to pull this out. It's a big box, but Alfred Hitchcock Collection. I still haven't seen a lot of those movies. Wow. A bit of a shame on myself. Hey, I got it on sale, so you can't say it's a complete waste. Hey, my Rings movies, the Rings collection. I bought this to import it, and my reviews may be old of it, but you know, I still reviewed them. Actually, a lot of these are I kind of have these back to back because there was the J-horror era. Dark Water, The Grudge, Pulse, One Missed Call. All those are part of the J-horror movies I reviewed. Okay, next up is, well, we passed Christmas already, but Silent Night, Deadly Night. Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2. And the 3, 4, and 5. Actually, I got these because I remember Shout Factory discontinued these for a while, I think, and they were like going pretty high, at least too high for me. But then I noticed that they were on sale, in fact, and I was like, I gotta get these. The first one actually has a lot of trauma at the beginning, but then it just becomes a kind of stupid slasher. You know, an old slasher. And then the second one half of it is recapping the first movie. This is famous as one of the worst movies of all time, and I love it's so bad it's good. There's a lot of its scenes that I find funny, but half of it is recapping the first movie. I can't give it all credit when half of it only half of it is an original movie. The third one is one of the most boring movies I've seen in my life. I hated it. Absolutely. I think of maybe reviewing these movies next Christmas, and I'm dreading whenever I have to see the third one again. So if I don't review it next Christmas, blame the third movie, because I hate it. But maybe I will end up looking at it because I actually quite like the fourth movie. The fourth movie is surprisingly pretty good. It's limited. It's directed by a director, Yuzna. People who watch the direct-to-video movies from back then are probably familiar with him. He did 4 and 5 of these. His work's pretty good. And 4 and 5 in this are pretty good horror movies, even if they have the limitations of a direct-to-video budget. 4 has a better story, but 5 is more of the sort of slasher killing movie that you expect. But hey, at least then it's entertaining. Better than what the series was before. I can't think of any other movie that did that, where it had sequels and it actually gets better, by the time you're at the end of it. Really weird. That was kind of my start of the slasher genre of movies in my collection. Where I have Friday the 13th. Friday the 13th 3D is actually my first horror movie I've ever seen. I was, I think it was Halloween, so they were showing it on Sci-Fi, and, being like 7 years old, I watched it, and thankfully it's a goofy 3D movie. So I didn't get too scared of it. It was also older, so some of its effects weren't as convincing. So, hey, that's a fun fact. I haven't seen these because there's like 8 of them here, and 2 of them aren't even on this collection. I didn't have enough money to get Shout Factories. This was 8 movies for Shout Factories is ranges from 80 on cheapest to over 100. I got 8 of these for 30. I would like to get a whole collection though. Either I'll import the rated versions from Germany, or I don't know. If I feel like too much, if I feel like I just want to get all of them, I might buy individual copies of the Shout Factory release. And what's Friday the 13th without Nightmare on Elm Street? I quite love Wes Craven's stuff, as I found out in 2022, I think. This, of course, 1 and 3 are the kings, and New Nightmare, of course. This is a great collection, though. I know Friday the 13th, for some reason I have an odd feeling I might have messed up and said Five Nights at Freddy's. I hope I'm not that stupid. Nightmare on Elm Street, even when it gets bad, I don't like 4, but 5 and 6 are so funny. Unlike the Friday the 13th collection, this is just what, $24 for 7 movies? That's great. I know Shout Factory made a great collection, but it's a little bit too great for my wallet. I love these movies though. I hope I'm not being too complaining. I do love these movies. First one, great horror. The third one, really great. Absolutely great horror sequel. Arguably conclusive to the series, really. And then forces would collide in the remakes. Well, this is another reason why I didn't get the Shout Factory collection, because I can get Friday the 13th remake on here, and Nightmare on Elm Street remake on here, and Freddy vs. Jason, where both collide in one package. This was pretty cheap too. really just Jason Goes to Hell and Jason X jeopardized the feasibility of having a whole collection for cheap. But hey, I have not seen these. I keep meaning to watch the remake of Nightmare, even though I hear it's crap. But hey, I want to watch it. Maybe even review it. But one thing I do want to review, although I'm a bit scared because they're famous and what new can I say about these movies? But, you know, maybe I should just go for it one day. Because if I have love, why not express it? And that is the love I have for Scream. I felt bad when during my Q&A like a while back, someone asked about the Scream show, and I hadn't even seen the movies. Hopefully this can appease them a bit. I love Scream 1, 2, not so big on 3, but it made such a comeback with 4. 4 is great, my favorite Scream movie. Absolutely great postmodern writing, and excellent horror by Wes Craven. Really, really some like amazingly tense scenes in these movies. I ought to get the 4K though. Hey, if you see for the 4K collection of 1, 2, and 3 on my shelf, you can probably bet a review's coming. Oh, this is also another great collection because it includes some documentaries on Scream. I think its impact, you know, the making of, a really good collection here. You know, pretty affordable too. Oh, thank God, I finished this recording session for tonight. I don't know if I'm going to record next up, because I have more movies on the shelf down here. I don't know if I'm going to do it this night. My throat is killing me. Maybe I'll do it tomorrow. I don't know. Either way, it will be the same video, so it'll come up next. Well, anyways, see you right now. And welcome back. It's tomorrow, or today. Anyways, let's get on to the next one. So, next up, we left off at Scream, and it's Scream again. Scream 2022, I think. Let's just call it Scream 5. And also, since we're here, I've got Scream 6, and, well, I'm not so fond of these as I am it Screams before this. I'm likely to review Scream, the sequels. Actually, I'm likely to review all of Scream. I mean, why would I review just the sequels? I think that these movies are not that good. I think that Scream always commented on Scream worked best when there were strong tropes backing the story. It's a postmodern movie. It's commentary on movies. And in a world where the legacy sequel hasn't gotten that many trilogies, I don't think there are that many strong tropes for this. I'll try to be light on the details because I'm likely to review the whole series in the future, so I'll go more in depth. But there are certain decisions with these, like the sort of psychological approach to the main character, that I felt was out of place for the Scream series. I was really hoping 6 would be better because a lot of people said it was better, but I wasn't so into it. And since Scream 7, there are a lot of trouble with the actors, and I think last I heard the director opted out. It seems like this might not be the best it can be, which is a shame. It's always hard when it started off on such a good note with such great horror. So it had a lot to live up to, so I understand that it had a lot of trouble in its way. One thing about my video yesterday that I realized, or, you know, the last part of my recording, I ended up missing a movie. It was alongside a lot of the other movies that I was like, oh, I reviewed that. It is Eraserhead. Now, this is a movie that I quite like. It's one of the more artsy, abstract movies that I own, and it's very, you know, its visuals are very symbolic of a kind of story it's trying to tell. In fact, the director David Lynch has never told the meaning of this, preserving its ambiguity and the life it has within the viewer and their interpretation of it, which I really love. Because, you know, one of the best parts of art is the ability for how different people to see it. So I really like that aspect. And there are quite a lot of different ways. I think if you showed this to people, you can make a very large discussion over what they think it means. And that's part of what I really like about it. And another thing about this feature, this Blu-ray, it has a lot of Lynch's short films in it. So you get Eraserhead and, you know, some little shorts that really beef out this package. And one thing that's kind of interesting about this is I was very allured to this movie in that I saw this movie on TV once, and seeing it on TV, it was when I was like in my teens, and I was so confused. This is so surreal. So seeing it on TV, I was just like, what's going on? And I think that that's something that kind of the streaming service has nullified a bit. We don't have so much. Now we turn on the TV and often we know what we're going to watch. We know what we're getting into. But on like broadcast TV, sometimes you'd flip the channel and not know what was going on. Like you'd find some surreal stuff. And I think that although I really like streaming, the ability to stumble upon some obscure works, or, well, this isn't so obscure, you know, at least to film people, the ability to stumble onto works and be like, what is this, is kind of lost on the streaming generation. So something I really appreciate with my first experience here. And the other Blu-ray I forgot to show is not with my Blu-ray collection, and I will explain why. Well, what is the cover? Whoop, whoop, whoop. Death Come True, the behind the scenes of it. Now, those unfamiliar with Death Come True, in fact, you might just find it weird enough that it's a behind the scenes solely on one Blu-ray. But Death Comes True is an FMV video game released by Kazutaka Kodaka, or developed by him, I mean, who created Danganronpa, and it's linear, but it's a choose your own FMV adventure. You have choices in it, even though its story is linear. So it teeters the line between movie and game. It's live action, and it's about movie length. So this is the behind the scenes of that. I usually keep it with my games. Okay, and next up, I'm going to try to be going through these fast, at least faster than I was yesterday. But I cannot shorten this video that much, you know, as you can probably already tell by now. Next up, this is one I got quite recently, but one I saw back in 2022. I saw it for Halloween. My girlfriend showed this to me, actually. I'm a fan of found footage. Actually, I forget if I said how my collection is organized. It's like movie, TV, then DVD, Blu-ray, and then it's subgenres. And now we're getting into the genre of found footage. This is a really early found footage movie. It's from 1992, I think. Yeah, 92. And it was a British broadcast that pretended to be live. It was a live broadcast of a quote-unquote haunted house. And essentially it's these people pretending that this house is haunted. I say pretending like that. That undermines the realism here. It was a really good trick and several people fell for it. And in fact, there's a lot of stuff that I missed the first time around where there are little hidden imagery in this. So even though it was a live broadcast, it's almost like it's made for you to watch twice. Well, not a live broadcast, but even though it was a broadcast event, it's like it was made to be released on DVD and watched, more than once to notice some of that imagery. It can be, there are some chilling moments here, but it's an early found footage movie. I think that a lot of the scares come from the idea that this is real. And I think that once that's broken down, I think that there are some bits that don't completely scare you. But of course, as you watch it, like, I think you have to do this a bit with stuff like early found footage, like the Blair Witch. You have to give yourself into the idea that it is real. And once you do, it is a pretty creepy one. And another 101 film, that's the distributor, that I really like. In fact, this is coming up in my next review, another found footage work, The Last Broadcast. Now, this one is more of a documentary than found footage. In fact, found footage hadn't really... People think of it like a genre, but it really only took off after The Blair Witch. In fact, I have to think, if this took off, could documentary have been the main style we see? Could we be seeing so many documentary-style horror films? This has a kind of similar premise to The Blair Witch, where people go into the woods hunting and a mythical creature, the Jersey Devil, but they end up dead, except for one person who becomes the prime suspect. It released very close to The Blair Witch, and in fact, there was kind of a media stint about the similarities between this. Well, did The Blair Witch rip it off and stuff? I love this movie. I think this is a really smart movie that some people don't necessarily get. I think there are a lot of people who do get it, but I think that for some, it doesn't necessarily... it's not necessarily read a certain way by some. I think this has a lot of good messages about the media, about truth. And if you want to know about it and about the Blair Witch media stint on it, watch my review. It's coming up next. Not next, but within the next few days. Speaking of found footage, Blair Witch Project and Blair Witch. Watch my review on them. Speaking of Quarantine, watch my review on it, but if you hadn't, this is an adaptation of Wreck. Essentially, it's like a zombie. Wreck is like a zombie kind of found footage movie that's done really excellently. This one is not done as excellently. Next up, this is also found footage, although they kind of blur the lines in some of these here, where it's like, oh, I'll just say, I think the best way to say it is the first one of these is a guy, the found footage is someone has a camera eye. Yeah, these can get kind of crazy, but the VHS series is a series I really love. In fact, whenever there's a new, my first exposure to this was with some friends. I mentioned one earlier, Martha. We started watching these, and we watched the whole trilogy in one night. I mean, there was something about it's an anthology found footage movie, so there's something about the little bite-sized shorts that just made it so bingeable. I really like VHS a lot. And in fact, whenever there's been a new one, I've watched it, mainly with my girlfriend as of the recent ones. VHS 2 has a lot of good ones, but I think I'm of the controversial opinion that I prefer the first one. But I think you might be wondering why I have VHS 2 rather than 1. Well, I was kind of I do plan to get all of them, but I was planning to do a co-host review, a crossover review with my friend Martha, who hasn't posted much on her channel. But I wanted to do a crossover on these movies because there were some shorts that we, disagreed on, and I think it would make for a great discussion of opinions between us. Hopefully I do that later. Repo Man, the genetic opera. I'm not so much into musicals. It's directed by the guy who did Saw 2. I forget his name, I think. Darren Lynn Bousman. It has some of Twisted Pictures productions from Saw, but I haven't seen it yet. I got it, and I got that, and this. I don't really want this. I don't care about Breed. Kind of care about the Day of the Dead remake. I'd like to get all of the Dead films one day, even though Day, I think, or Dawn of the Dead is really rare on Blu-ray, or maybe even non-existent. But I own those two films because they came in a lot with Dead Silence. Now, Dead Silence is a film written by Lee Wannell of Saw fame. His agent told him, hey, if this movie Saw isn't a hit, you don't want it to be your only movie. You don't want your only movie to if it's bad. If it ends up bad and doing poorly, you don't want it to represent you. So write another movie. So he cranked this one out. Apparently, the script was bought by someone else. He said, I think, from what I heard, there was a lot changed in this. So who knows? I don't know if, who we can necessarily blame. It's not that great. It's all right. It's okay. I don't want to seem mean about it, though. I think that it's a lot of hard work to make an okay movie. So regardless of what I'll say on the movie, I never wanted to demean the works of those who worked on this. And I think that it's just okay. Saw and Jigsaw. I'd say watch my reviews of these series, but they're so old. I'm embarrassed. You don't want to see me try to do a story review with my sock puppet. I think I love the first 3 Saw movies. I don't like when it became really gory because that kind of ruined the image of the first 3, which actually have some pretty good horror, tension, and story. Saw 3 has a really interesting backstory of production that I want to tell one day. As you noticed in my reviews, I've kind of become really kind of a documentary about how some movies are made, and I want to do one about the making of Saw 3. I actually did talk a little bit of it. I talked a little bit on it in my original video, but my Saw 3 review took so long to produce. I kept going back and adding different stuff that I just cut that out. I couldn't edit anymore. I wasn't so happy with it, so that didn't end up making it in the video. Spiral. Now this one is pretty recent that I reviewed. I was looking forward to it, but it didn't deliver. It's less Saw, less Death Game, more of a CSI, more of a cop mystery movie where the deaths are incidentally made by Saw devices. Speaking of Saw, I got this because I had a hankering for Saw. Another Death Game movie. There are like 3 different movies named Escape Room. I haven't seen it. I need to. Actually, look at that. Look at that. Look at the little jigsaw pieces. They know what they're doing. They know you want to see Saw. And next up, equally scary. Jingle All the Way. Not equally scary, actually, because despite what critics said at the time, I love this movie. This movie is such a fun watch. So many humorous moments. I forget. Let me find his name here. Phil Hartman plays. Rest his soul. Rest in peace. He is so funny in this movie also, and I just wanted to give him a shout out because it's sad that he's not around anymore. This movie is such an entertaining watch. It's goofy. It's stupid. But that's exactly what makes it fun. And that's exactly what makes some of my favorite comedies. Now we have Turtles, the quadrilogy, I guess. It features the 3 80s movies and TMNT, the animated one. That, I think, from what I understand, the director actually wanted it, actually considers it like a sequel to these 3. The animated one is really interesting. Not a lot of people talk about it, but it's kind of like, you know how a lot of the Turtles stories take place while they're saving the day? The TMNT animated one is interesting because it tries to tell the story of after their heyday. The Turtles have kind of split up, and now they have to reunite to save the world. I think that's part of what made it not do so well, because it isn't an introductory piece. It's not a piece that stands alone. It's a piece to appreciate after you've seen some other turtle media. And I think that's why it maybe didn't do so well. Maybe not a lot of people talk about it. The first movie, I can't point. I'm sorry, I would look like an idiot. The first movie is really good and actually pretty dramatic. I think that while the Turtles are of course humorous, it can get kind of heavy. Not like too much so for younger children, but it doesn't understate the drama. There's a tension to that plot, and I quite like that it went to that approach. Now, Turtles 2 is more goofy, more hammy, more, Saturday morning cartoony, but not too much so. It's like in between, cartoon and the first movie. It's not as dramatic, but, well, what can I say? It has Vanilla Ice ninja rap in it. That says enough. And controversially, too, I prefer the sequel to the first one, just because it's more fun, and that's what I like about it. It's just a funner watch. Now, Turtles 3 is a pretty bad movie, but, it's one that it's kind of so bad it's good to me. I think you can get a few laughs out of it when the Turtles go back in time to goofy samurai times. Help, I'm a turtle and I can't get up. Next up, Michael Jackson's Moonwalker. I wanted this so bad that I imported it from Europe, I think. This is from some European country. For some reason, it's not available on Blu-ray. I really don't know why. It's Michael. I know that he had some controversy in his time, but posthumously, once people die, people are like, oh, yeah, he was all right. They saw the good in him. And I think that's why I'm not saying anything on Michael, whether or not he's good or bad. I'm just saying that's why I am surprised that they didn't release it posthumously, because I think that's when opinion of him lightened up to where they could have gotten away with releasing this. Oh well, they did in Europe anyway. This is a movie that you always hear about Michael Jackson turning into a robot. He's a transformer at the end, fights a drug lord. That's funny. That's the last 30 minutes of the movie. The rest of it can't decide what it is. The first bit is pretty much like B-roll concert footage that you'd expect in a Michael documentary. And the second bit are original songs that, albeit are cool, don't connect in the form of a narrative. It only gets to be a movie at the end. And while that movie it becomes is really enjoyable, I was disappointed you kind of had to work to get there. Hey, at least you get some good music to listen to before you do. Now, here is Wakaliwood Super Action, Who Killed Captain Alex and Bad Black, Volume 1. Now, they haven't made a Volume 2 yet. I got this because it became quite rare until they reprinted this. It's a famous So Bad It's Good movie, but it's a movie made on like $200. I mean, pretty impressive. Even if you have to, I think even if you do laugh at some of its production, I think you have to admire what they did to get this. I haven't seen it though. I have to. That's kind of the start, maybe Michael was, of my kind of so bad it's good movie subgenre. Troll 1 and Troll 2. You know I didn't buy this for Troll 1. No one would be talking about Troll 1 if it weren't for Troll 2. And while Troll 2 and Silent Night Deadly Night 2 are often competitors for the so bad it's good movie, I have to side with Troll 2. It's just so wacky. So much of it is nonsensical, so over the top. I just have quite a lot of fun with this one. What can I say? And it's funny too, because it lives as Troll 2, but it's not even supposed to be Troll 2. You know, it was some other movie in Italy. And another infamous bad movie, Manos, The Hands of Fate. A movie made in Texas by a traveling manure salesman. And this movie is not that good. It's pretty bad. I think that, but it's good riffing material. You know, just an old, very cheap movie that the little girl in this movie ended up making a sequel to. She kind of, I guess she ended up embracing the fans of this so bad it's good movie that she ended up making a sequel to it. And this Blu-ray has some cool bonus features like a little Muppet Sesame Street kind of puppet remake of this movie. And I think it also includes Mystery Science Theater 3000, I think. Maybe not. It has, either way, this is a pretty good watch. At least if you can get it for cheap. Okay, next up is another fun watch. Mac and Me. Oh my gosh, I need to watch this with Janie, my girlfriend, soon. Because this is one that I absolutely cracked up at the first time. Goofy puppets, you know, absolutely E.T. ripoff that thinks it's enchanting while promoting Coke and McDonald's. Just an absolutely, really, you have to see it. A really stupid movie that is really quite fun. Next up is Wicked World. Now, Wicked World is made by a Canadian director, I think written and directed by a Canadian who made the movie Things, another so bad it's good movie. And Things drove me insane. It's one of the only movies I can think of that I watched, and after I finished watching, I couldn't figure out what just happened. I was really confused on, like, what, I couldn't even tell you what the plot was about. There are these monsters, a character disappears, then shows up again later spontaneously just to die. Maybe he had filming time issues. I don't know. Things is a really weird movie. It might be my favorite so bad it's good movie because it is just a really surreal watch that, and even though it's not actually scary, it has that low budget kind of inhuman kind of, who could make this? This doesn't make any sense kind of quality to it. Wicked World is another movie that's shot on VHS, so it doesn't look that great. It doesn't look that great. I think it's actually maybe a little bit remastered here. I think they might have added some new frills to this one. Yeah, there's it has a 2019 director's cut. He came back to, you know, clean up some stuff and add some effects, I think. I need to watch this because Things really blew my mind. I ought to watch this one day. Star Trek. Now, this is the Star Trek 6 film, Hexology, whatever you'd call it. Now, what people probably don't know is that I quite like Star Trek. I hope I didn't say Star Wars earlier. I quite like Star Trek. I watched a lot of it with my dad in my early teens, and I really liked it. There's a lot of smart episodes. There's a lot of really smart episodes from it back then. Ones that can really make you think. And so watching these movies, they had a kind of stigma to them. Everyone always said that the sequels, the even numbered ones, are better than the odd numbered ones. I went into all these with an open mind, but they ended up being right. The even numbered ones are way better than the odd number ones. The first one is such a test in boredom with like long sweeping shots of ships. Star Trek in fact, that's Star Trek the motion picture. It's often called Star Trek the slow motion picture. In fact, from what I remember, it rehashes a plot of an episode or two from the original series. But 2 is really great. It plays off of one of the characters, Khan, from the series, and so it's really made for the fans. And it has a lot of great tense moments in it. 3, The Search for Spock, another odd numbered one. 4, what's 4? Oh yeah, 4 is the one with the whales. 4 is a more environmentally themed one, written by Leonard Nimoy. Also rest in peace, he played Spock. Written and directed by Nimoy, I think, and it has a good message, but it doesn't take itself too seriously. It's one where you can just sit back, watch and laugh and enjoy the characters, which, I think the Star Trek characters are classic. So Star Trek 4 is great. Star Trek 5 is another odd numbered one. It's goofy. I can actually enjoy 5. It's kind of so bad it's good to me. 6 is another even numbered one. 5 was called The Final Frontier, almost like you'd think it would be the last one, but I guess they were like, we can't end it on that. So 6 comes out, and it has another great message about peace. It revolves around peace and war, and there's also an interesting kind of murder mystery about what's happening on the ship. So, well, that's my kind of overview of all 6 of them. Speaking of intelligent works, Gattaca. I just recently rewatched this movie, and it's written and directed by the guy behind The Truman Show. Another one of my favorite movies that I sadly don't own. It's a really, really great movie. And this is one about, essentially, racism still exists, but they've made it down to a science where people can discriminate on their very genes. They figure out essentially where people think, oh, your genes say this, so this is your fate. And it's a movie about determinism and about this guy who essentially switches identity with someone who has been genetically modified, the elite of society, so to speak. And he does it so that he can get into space. It's his dream to be an astronaut, and he wants to prove himself. And it's about, it's essentially an anti-eugenics, anti-determinist kind of film. Really smart, and I quite like it. I first saw it in my ethics class, and it stuck with me since then. A really good watch. Unlike the next films I'm going to look at, Resident Evil. Let's just call this the Alice series. I love Resident Evil. Absolutely big fan of the games. Have played almost all of them. And so I've seen all of these movies. And what can I say? It's Paul W.S. Anderson's fanfic about his wife's guest starring Resident Evil characters. He makes his wife look so cool and naked while the other characters stand by from the actual game you like. The other characters you actually like, just kind of stand by as a prop to make her look cooler. What can I say? I'll say how far this goes from Resident Evil. The third movie is like a Mad Max movie, and Chris Redfield, the main character of the games, doesn't show up until the fourth movie in, And that's his only movie he shows up in. The main character of the games only shows up once, and in the 4th movie. What were they thinking? What were they thinking? And then next up we got America's second shot at a live action Resident Evil. Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City. This movie combined the plots of Resident Evil 1 and 2, something I was really concerned with. And while I don't like a lot of its changes, in fact I think the writing alone is pretty poor, but it was kind of neat to see it once after all this time look like the games. And I mean look like the games. You see the mansion, you see the RPD facility. This looks like the games. You know, I just wish, you know, there are some things I wish could be different, but compared to the Alice series, I was happy to see it looked like the games, while also wishing it could be a bit better. This was one that took me by surprise. Now, I quite like Pokemon. I grew up watching the anime. I was obsessed with Meowth. So I decided to watch Detective Pikachu. Now, this is a movie by Legendary Studios, or I think it's by Legendary. They did the Godzilla and Kong movies. And it's a pretty fun, the mystery itself, I think it's kind of predictable, but, you know, it might entertain kids, at least. I think that its ability to adapt the Pokemon world into real life is really charming. I think that it's really fun because I think the Pokemon world I just love the creatures. So it's really fun to see this brought to kind of a real life adventure. I wish they could have made another one of these. I'm surprised they didn't, because it really feels like they started something here that they could have developed. There's so many Pokemon, so there's so many different plots you could do. I think that this is an entertaining watch. It may not be like amazing, but it's a pretty fun adventure along the way with some good visuals. Legendary always pulls out all the stops on their CGI, and this is no different. The Pokemon look great in this movie, and it's definitely a fun world you want to be in. It adapted the world of Pokemon well. This is an enjoyable watch. We are starting with my Resident Evil movies back there. We are starting my video game movie subgenre. Sonic the Hedgehog. I love Sonic the Hedgehog. I am an absolute oh, there goes my water. I am an absolute Sonic fan. I grew up with Sonic a lot. I played a lot of the games, and I wanted to watch this because people said it was good. And we all know the infamous ugly Sonic that Paramount changed, and people praise them for making a decision that will get them more money when people said they wouldn't get them money. Ooh, friendly company. Hey, I'm glad we got what we did, but, you know, if they were really great, they would have gotten it right the first time. Sorry to be a bit snarky, but, you know, I'm a bit hesitant to go gung-ho over praising companies. And sadly, while I love Jim Carrey's performance, Jim Carrey's performance is really funny in this movie. He's a great Dr. Eggman. Sonic was a little weird. He, in the games, he's like a cool teenager, but here they keyed in on his hyperactiveness to make him kind of like a hyperactive kind of young, like almost 12-year-old. Like he runs, ooh, what's that? Ooh, what's that? That looks fun. He's not the Sonic that I like from the games, and that's a pretty big deal for me. Even if his design looks good here, he's not exactly what I wanted. I mean, there's a scene where he farts. I'm gonna get some hate over it. I'm like one of the only people who doesn't like that movie. I ought to watch the sequel. I do want to give the sequel another try because it seems to be more in line with the games and more about the characters. I definitely am not opposed to the sequel, but from the first movie alone, I'm not a fan. But I will give the sequel a fair chance, and I do want to like it. So, don't take that too much, for my statement for the whole deal. Next up, and I think we're getting into video game anime. Bayonetta. I quite like Bayonetta, the games, and this little movie is really well animated. It's a good retelling of the game's plot, but I don't think that. I think that if you're an average viewer, you'll be like, "Oh, why did that happen?" They kind of adapt some stuff from the games a bit too directly for the average viewer, like Bayonetta getting weapons doesn't really make sense in terms of a narrative plot. It's just the structure of the games, because you have to develop your character and get new weapons and play them out. So I think that that's a bit where it's more like a game. I think that this is more of a movie to appeal to fans of the games, and it has all the actors from the games, I think. So I think that this is a pretty enjoyable watch for those who like the game. It's really great it's good at adapting the action of the game into animation. Okay, next up, Steins Gate. What's it? Steins Gate Region Load Deja Vu? Yeah, the Region Load of Deja Vu. That's definitely an anime title. Now, I played Steins Gate Elite, which is kind of a visual novelification of the anime. It uses anime footage, but it's a visual novel. I really love the story. I love time-twisty narratives. It is really great. I think whether or not you watch the anime or the game, I don't know the anime per se, but just a really excellent story. I really want to explore more of the Science Adventures series. Absolutely love it. This acts as a kind of sequel to that. It breaks the rules established. It breaks a bit of the rules established, but I ended up being able to overlook it because it is such an emotional journey for those who really like the characters. Essentially, in Steins Gate, the main character, Okabe Rintaro, ends up going through time to stop a tragic event, and he ends up going through so much to save people he loves. And he's going through these time loops, but no one else knows, because, they're just like, oh, this is the first time I'm here. They don't know about the time loop. And essentially, this is exploring his love interests, going through a similar sort of existential turmoil, where she kind of has to end up saving Okabe, and returning a bit of the favor and learning what he went through. And it's a pretty good emotional journey. This is for fans of the game and anime. This is for some people who love the characters, and even if you may criticize the plot a bit, for its characters will hold you through, I think. Next up, more movies. More movies. What was I gonna pull out? A hot dog? These are Resident Evil movies. The Resident Evil animes. The Generation. I quite enjoyed this movie. Leon's character is a bit off. He's a bit monotone, but seeing Claire and Leon in a movie, in this homage to Resident Evil 2, in fact, it even flashes back to Resident Evil 2. This is before the remake came out. So this is as close as you were going to see to Resident Evil 2 in HD back then. This is definitely a movie for the fans. I got a kick out of this one. Claire is probably my favorite or second favorite Resident Evil character. So seeing her and Leon team up in this was enjoyable. Resident Evil Damnation. Now this one includes Ada, another great character. And this movie, There is so much. This director loves Resident Evil. If you looked in the behind the scenes, he talks about the tyrants through the series, and even in the American live action movies. He knows his stuff. And there are some real moments here that appeal to fans, like Mr. X versus a liquor. This is, and it has a better story and better action than the first one. This is like probably my favorite Resident Evil CGI movie. I really like this one. Like out of all this is my favorite Resident Evil movie. Oh, and not only that, but Leon's character in that one is done more justice. So at least they learned from the first one, and he's a bit more, from what I remember, his sarcastic self from the games you'll recognize. So, quite a fan of Damnation, especially as a Resident Evil fan. Sadly, the director didn't come back, neither the studio. The studio didn't come back for Resident Evil Vendetta. Not so much of a fan of this one. Yeah, I like that they brought Rebecca Chambers back. I really like Rebecca. I'm glad they brought her back into the canon. But this is a movie that it has some good action. It has some, its action is entertaining, but sadly its characterization of Leon feels weird for what he's gone through. It's kind of a rehash of Chris's story from Resident Evil 6. And I don't like the ending. It's kind of a fix all, erase all consequences ending. But then they came out recently with Resident Evil Death Island. I reviewed this for my internship earlier, and I think that this is a movie that aims more at the fan service. It's, Avengers, this is the Avengers of Resident Evil. All your favorite characters collide in this work, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't fanboy over certain moments. I think that there are certain moments in this that aren't like great. I think it's not as good as Damnation, but the fan service got me. There are a lot of references to past Resident Evil works, and it carries off of a really heavy plot line of Jill Valentine that hadn't been continued. I think that this does a lot right. I think that the issues here are pretty minimal, that this is an enjoyable watch, especially as a Resident Evil fan. And I think that it's great that they appeal directly to the fans. They're the people who know the series inside and out. They're the people who you want rooting for you, and I appreciate that. Next up, I played Final Fantasy VII Remake. I got so into it. And I got these. Did I say Resident Evil 7? Final Fantasy VII Remake, and I got so into these into Final Fantasy that I bought these, and I need to watch them. I feel bad. I really should have waited, but it was the start of COVID, and I was like, ooh, I have so much time to play Final Fantasy, and I got these and didn't end up watching them. And now we've been in the animation space, but now we're going into more animation. Junkhead. This is an interesting movie, post-apocalyptic, about a robot who's the only chance to save humanity. It's stop-motion animation, and it looks really insane. It's an indie project. Some guy who's a newbie hadn't made a movie. This is his first movie. He was animating it. He didn't have much practice. This is definitely a passion project. I have to watch this soon. This definitely looks really interesting. Some horrific monstery imagery here. It looks like a really creative movie. Just from the trailers, I quite like the visuals alone. Perfect Blue. Probably my favorite anime movie. It's psychological horror. It really keeps you on your toes. It keeps you guessing. The mystery, I couldn't have guessed it. And by the end of it, it's psychological horror, but by the end of it, you'll be wondering what's going on. Like there's so like it really gets in your head and tricks you with some of its editing. It makes you feel as you know, psychologically troubled as the character. This is a great thriller movie. Next up we have Unico, the Unicorn. This is a duology by Discotek. Another Blu-ray I have to watch. Unico is made by Sanrio, I think. I think Hello Kitty shows up in the background of one of these. Just looks like a cute adventure. I really love cute characters, cute animal characters, so I ought to watch this soon. Next up we have Night on the Galactic Railroad and The Life of Budori Gusko. Now these are movies by Kenji Miyazawa. This is a really surreal work, and it's really abstract. I think it's part of the Dream, some kind of subgenre in Japan where they made a lot of surreal abstract work. And it has this unique tone that you really settle in. And it's also kind of spiritual. It's still a kid's movie, but I think that for adults, it's one that will stick with you, the way you feel watching this and the stuff it makes you think about. The Life of Budori Gusko is almost like the life of the author of these books. Wait, I'm holding up Unico. I'm so silly. Gosh. The Life of Budori Gusko. Sorry. The Life of Budori Gusko is almost like the life of Kenji Miyazawa. Having looked into his past, this is like autobiographical. In fact, a lot of his values make their way into these movies. Interesting that this movie kind of reuses a lot of character designs from this movie, so it's almost like getting to see actors in different roles. Really unique for animation. This movie isn't talked about so much as this one, but I really love this one too. You know, these are both really, really good movies. Great visuals, and I think they both fit well as a duology. They fit well thematically with each other. In fact, look out for my review. Probably this year. I've been meaning to review them sometime. Dragon. Oh, the dragon. Yep, Dragon Ball Z. I grew up watching Dragon Ball Z. I really love Dragon Ball Z. And the Battle of the Gods is a great movie. I think that a lot of it lingers with the characters just having kind of fun at this party. Well, fun. They have to not make Beerus, a god of destruction, mad. And I think that this is a rare movie that can get away with not showing the main character training for his battle, because by this time, it's been so long since you've seen the Dragon Ball characters, and there are so many, you just want to hang out with them. And that's what this movie does. And not only that, after, it provides such a great battle between Goku and Beerus. And I think it's amazing that in all the time Dragon Ball's been around, this late into the game, Toriyama can make Beerus, who is one of my favorite Dragon Ball characters. You know, this late into the series, he makes one of my favorite characters of the series. So, really good work. I really like this. Next up is Dragon Ball Z Resurrection F. I wasn't so much of a fan of this. The fights could still be entertaining, but the plot wasn't that great. But it got Frieza back, which is definitely a big deal. That got a lot of eyes on this movie. I think that I'm not so big a fan of this one, but it's all right. I mean, you kind of watch these before you watch Super. They're kind of, I don't know why Super retold the story arc of those two movies, but hey, you know, if you want to watch Super, watch those. And I over the summer I watched the first arc of Super, and you know, I really liked it. And I watched it because of this movie, Dragon Ball Super Broly. Now, while this spoiled a bit of what happens later in Super, it had a really good story. It adapted Broly's character into the main canon of Dragon Ball really well. And this very famous character is one who didn't get love in the main canon of the series, only in the non-canonical movies. So it's really nice that they brought him into the main canon in this really great adventure of a movie. Has a lot of good moments. Now, I mentioned a classic TV show, Star Trek, earlier, but here's another kind of classic TV show, Batman, the Adam West Show. I said that like it's its official name, but you know what I mean. This is the first one where it brings Adam West and Burt Ward back into the suit, in animated form. And there are a lot of fun references to the series, and it starts off with, it goes through the motions of, hey, remember this trope, and that's funny. But then halfway through, it ends up subverting those very tropes in a unique story to tell. I got a kick out of this one. Watched a lot of the show with my dad, and I watched this with my dad. We quite enjoyed it. As we did this one, Batman vs. Two-Face. Sadly, this released after Adam West's death. But that also makes this a pretty big deal. One of his last roles is playing his most famous roles, and I'm glad he had that. This is another really good one. William Shatner plays Two-Face, so it's kind of in the vein of what the show was like, where they'd get guest stars to play villains. So it carries on the spirit of the show, and from what I remember, I think it's a bit of a mystery in this movie. But I'm trying to remember, it's also enjoyable. Like, it's kind of like getting another movie based on the show. This one is like a movie based on the memory of the show. This one is like a movie if the show had another chance. And what I mean is this one knows the legacy of the goofiness of the show. This one kind of carries it on in its own story. I think this one has better writing, I think. From what I remember, though, these are both really good watches. I think this one had better writing, but they're both pretty funny. Definitely a good watch. This one is pretty special to me. The Big Bad Fox and Other Tales. This movie's kind of special because it's one of the last movies I saw with my girlfriend when she visited me here. And so this movie holds a very special place in my heart because it's part of how I celebrated Christmas with her on her very, very special visit. It's a movie about, you may think it's about the Big Bad Fox, but it's about different stories. It really does feel like a book. The director went on to direct Migration. That's another really good movie. I think it's my favorite Illumination movie. I have to watch his work on Ernest and Celestine. But three individual stories that are both, the characters are really lovable. In fact, watching it, you kind of feel like, you feel like there's almost more stories. It really makes you feel like there's, more you can get out of these characters. They're that enjoyable. And, the art in it is really great. It looks like a book come to life. A really enjoyable watch. I'm really happy to have shared it with my girlfriend. Oh boy, you're gonna kind of groan at this one, maybe. Well, look, we all watch, I think a lot of us all watch this show, probably. My Little Pony, the movie. I grew up watching, why would I say grew up? Well, I guess I did. I'm old now. I'm 24, ooh. I started watching MLP when I was like 11, I think. And, I was in that brony craze. I thought I didn't like season 3, so I dropped off. But I wanted to watch this movie. So I got this movie. And, here's a kind of fun fact. Back when I finished the Saw series, I was lost. I wasn't sure what to review. So I watched this again and tried to write down a review for it, but I couldn't really get into it. So there's another Lost Ziboyeye episode. On my first watch, I enjoyed it. The songs are good. Otherwise, it's kind of just okay. It's my second watch, I thought it was just okay, really. And I have not interacted with the series since, really. Who knows? Although, oddly, I've had the idea to talk about this series in Japan just because it's kind of interesting. You've noticed I've become more a bit of the backstory of movies, and that might be one less of a review and more of like a what happened on it over in Japan. Kind of interesting. Remember how I got Martha Alpha and Omega? Well, she got me this. The 101 Dalmatians duology from the UK. I think the first movie's just alright. I haven't seen the second one. It's neat. I'm glad that there are both movies on Blu-ray. Thank you, UK. The UK and other countries have so many cool movies on Blu-ray. That's kind of my two Disney movies I have. Zootopia. This is one of the last movies I've seen in theaters. I'm not much of a movie goer. I kind of just get Blu-rays. Hey, you know, I love cute animals. This is a really fun watch. A really good movie. So, I don't know what to say. You've probably seen it. A little Sonic X 2 episode DVD for kids meant you to be trading these like trading cards. I don't think it really took off. This next up is we're entering my TV show collections. We're nearing the end here. Cheese Sweet Home and Cheese New Address. These movies are not movies. These two shows are really, really special to me because I watched them when I was younger. Actually, I got these Blu-rays kind of when I started college. I was stressed and I bought a lot of stuff. I'm like, oh, I need to be happy with this change in my life. So I bought these because Cheese Sweet Home is such a special anime to me. I watched it when I was younger, when I was like 14 or 13, and I just really fell in love with it. I thought it was so cute, and I adored every episode. The episodes are only 2 minutes long. They're really easily digestible, and that just made them great little segments to watch. But some are multi-part, so you do get like bigger adventures a bit. Well, bigger little kitten adventures. I really like this, and this show is special because it inspired me to get my own cat. Nani is her name. I really like Nani. Of course, she's my cat. So that's really special to me because, hey, it's what got me a really great friend. Next up is the Faucons. This is a weird series. The episodes are also like 2 minutes. I guess that's somewhat common in Japan, where a voiceover, you know, mannequins, the actors, it's hard to describe. It's live action, but centers around mannequins. At least the family it centers around are played by mannequins, and they have a voiceover. And it's a really surreal watch. It's hard to describe. Essentially, it's kind of like it's Japan parodying American family culture and stuff. Although, I can't even say that because it kind of devolves into just weird oddities. And about just weirdness about like, and everyone picks on the son Mikey. It's a weird show, but that's why I like it. Next up, Godzilla. Based on the '98 American movie. I actually like that movie. That movie's a fun, it's kind of a so bad it's good watch. I get a kick out of it. I haven't seen this series though, but this is more of a testament to my Godzilla collection. Pinky and the Brain. I was obsessed. I'm pretty micro-obsessed with Pinky. I am really fond of the character. I probably should have waited until, because they only recently released the whole series in one cohesive collection. You know, before it was split into these 3 volumes. But hey, you know, I have volume 2, and It's more of a representation of my love of Pinky, one of my favorite cartoon characters. Next up, Bunnicula, another cartoon. This one is kind of overlooked because it was on Boomerang. It is a really... Oh, it's also by Maxwell Adams, I think from Billy and Mandy. This is a really cute show. I love horror, and I love introducing horror to children, you know, introducing it in a way that they can appreciate it. And this does it through, you know, goofy tooniness. I'm really fond of this show. It's something I almost always put on for Halloween. So this is only season 1. I kind of wish they could release the whole deal. But this show is also kind of special to me because it's how I dealt with stress, you know, going into college. You know, college is a big change, and so I kind of had some relief watching this cartoon. And next up is an anime I loved as a kid. My dad also loved it. My mom hated it, but that's only made me love it more. Bobobo Bobobo. Anyone who's familiar with this, this guy has a super fist of the nose hair power and just absolute crazy take on anime shonen shenanigans. You know, it's just all about goofy and being absolutely nonsense, balls to the wall jokes. I love this anime. I grew up loving it, and thank God Discotek released it on Blu-ray. And so it hadn't been available on, you know, for so long. So thankfully the English dub and Japanese dub are all here. Really, really great. And I really thank Discotek for it. Next up, here's some Gainax works. Panty and Stocking. I hear it's getting a sequel. I need to watch this. I got this at the start of COVID thinking I'd watch more anime. But I haven't yet. Then Gainax's Space, or maybe it's Studio Trigger. They changed names, I forget which. Space Patrol Luluko. It's a really pretty anime. It has great style. I really like it visually. And I think I enjoy the episodes at first, but it gets kind of draining and repetitive. But, you know, it's enjoyable in small doses. It's especially pleasing to the eyes. Now my favorite anime, Death Note. I already talked about one of my favorite detectives in fiction, L, one of my favorite characters. And it's such a clever, smart series. A clever, smart... blah, blah, blah. A clever, smart cat and mouse story. And it, like some of the best stories, set up rules and play within it. And this one plays within its rules in so many smart ways. Not to mention, it's a very interesting movie, thought-provoking series where you think I'll say one of my favorite lines in it is from the father, where he says, anyone with the power to kill people like that is cursed. So like merely having the temptation is a curse. It's a very, you know, it's a show that makes you think, what if this happened? What would you do if you had this power? You know, a really, really great anime series. And, I don't know what to say. What else? I don't know what else to say, but I really like it. I feel like it's on the tip of my tongue. What can I say? Oh, great soundtrack. Has great music too. You know, it's like you get the whole banana here, if that's even a phrase. I'm trying to think. Well, what was I going to say about Death Note? Oh well. Great English dub too. Serial Experiments Lane, another one of my favorite animes. The story is kind of like Pulse, if you remember my review. Essentially, it's kind of like about the spiritual world and computers. And it's a really surreal show. Not everything will make sense watching it, but it's something that you'll watch and you'll be like, I don't necessarily get it, but I get it. it is one that really makes you think, and the music in this one's also great. I've been wanting to review this lately. There's a sense of existential dread in this, and about our being, and the line between us, computer us, personality, what's a body. It is great. One of my favorite animes. High School Seihai Girls. I reviewed this a long time ago. I'm a big Sega fanboy, and well, it was fun seeing these anthropomorphized consoles go into some of my favorite Sega games. An enjoyable watch for those who are fans. Danganronpa 3. Now, I kept up with... Okay, I'll get this out of the way. I'm not so fond of the ending, but the mystery and the story... this was the first time... usually we get Danganronpa the games, and this was where the world was expanded. The games are mostly like death games, so they have a very narrowed perspective. But this was something where the narrative expanded a bit to both chronologically in backstory and in world. I was really into this. I was really, grasping. I was hooked. I was on the edge of my seat of so many episodes. Even if I think the ending could be better, the journey there was definitely really good. Resident Evil Infinite Darkness. This is a mini-series on Netflix, and I'm glad it got a Blu-ray. Once again, it sees a story between Leon and Claire. I like that aspect. It's mostly okay. I don't get why it wasn't just a movie. Really, it's the length of a movie. I don't get why it was split into episodes. It ends on a really interesting point between Leon and Claire's character that I'd like to see expanded upon. But otherwise, it's just okay. Next up, we have more Tokusatsu Kaiju stuff. Ultra Q, the series that started Ultraman. Now, I like what I've seen of this. I love old Tokusatsu effects. So I really, I enjoy this, but I haven't finished the series. This one is more of a limited series, Neo Ultra Q. And I haven't started this one. I want to watch these back to back. I'm not so into Ultraman. I think I can like watching an episode, but I don't think I'm into the whole thing. I'm more into these, especially more into this where it's like a limited series, only 13 episodes. And I'm not so into, main character gets big and fights. That's cool. But these are more like your kind of traditional Tokusatsu movies where your humans don't necessarily, it's hard to say. The monsters cause trouble. It's not a superhero kind of like series. I ought to watch more of it though. And that's the last of it. I'm kind of sorry that it took so long. I meant to speed it up a bit here, but it seems like, oh well, I said everything I wanted to say, and hopefully this has provided you some fun background noise while you work on something you need to. And I hope you enjoyed. I don't really talk that much without a script. I'm kind of self-conscious of how I present. I don't know if I necessarily talk that well impromptu, but hey, at the least this made for good practice on getting my thoughts in the moment, and I hope you enjoyed it. It was fun talking about my collection, even though it gave me a sore throat. But anyways, stay tuned for my review. Thank you so much for anyone who's watched this or any of my other videos. Thank you so much. I think the only other thing I want to say is my next probably impromptu video is me talking about my college degree. Pretty big moment, but anyways, stay tuned for my next review of The Last Broadcast. Anyways, see you. Have a great day. Love y'all. Bye-bye.